Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Down the Tee Tennis Podcast. It's been a couple of podcasts in a couple of days, as it turns out, as we're recording this. We decided to catch you up on some of the action ahead of previewing the US Open, and we're back again now for our US Open preview. We're previewing the men's and women's singles tournaments, where Dominic Thiem and Naomi Osaka are the defending champions. In fact, only one of those champions is defending, Naomi Osaka. Dominic Thiem is sadly not going to be part of the tournament, as we discussed yesterday. It's a shame he doesn't get to defend that title. And as we go into this Grand Slam, we've got Novak Djokovic, obviously still chasing the calendar year Grand Slam. It's been a long time since it's been done. It would be an absolutely stunning achievement. A lot of the narrative around this year, I believe, was based around the Golden Slam. He didn't manage that, but he's still chasing one of the most rare achievements in professional tennis. So still a big thing on the line for Novak Djokovic, and apparently he's been practicing really well. But we'll go into more of that later. We'll just run you through some of the names that are missing from the draw. Obviously, if you didn't catch our little catch-up podcast where we discussed this in further detail, a big thing around this tournament are two of the big three missing: Roger Federer, Rafa Nadal. A huge shame they're not going to be a part of this tournament. And among other Grand Slam champions, you've also got Stan Wawrinka, obviously a big part of that big three era in being one of the people pushing the big three the closest. And also Dominic Thiem, like we said, I've already mentioned about the defending champion not actually defending his title. On the women's side, we're missing both the Williams sisters, Serena and Venus. Venus was a wild card for the event, but she has had to pull out. Obviously, Serena would have been a direct entrant. And we're also missing 2020 Australian Open champion, Sophia Kenin. So a few names missing on either side, but without further ado, we'll start picking through the draw, starting with the men's quarterfinals. And for that first quarterfinal between Section 1 and Section 2, Ewan, who have you got as your quarterfinalists, and just a little bit on how you got there?
Sure, yeah, well, I've gone for Novak Djokovic against Hubert Hurkacz as the quarterfinal in that section. And Djokovic, as we talked about, chasing the calendar Grand Slam and the men's record 21st Slam. I don't think it's a bad draw up until that quarterfinal stage. I think you see in there he's got a qualifier first up, and then Jan-Lennard Struff probably in the second round before probably a third round clash with Ken Nishikori or David Goffin. And then in the fourth round would be most likely be Alex de Minaur, Aslan Karatsev, Jenson Brooksby, the young American wildcard, the other possibility in there. I would say most likely through the fourth round there would maybe be Karatsev, although he's been short form, as is de Minaur, so it could be a toss-up between the three. But I don't really see any big problems in there for Djokovic. Players like Struff, Goffin, Nishikori, he's got a great record against. It's a good matchup for him. He did lose to Karatsev earlier in the year, but I don't think he's quite at that level currently, the Russian. And de Minaur and Brooksby, I think, I'd be surprised if there's any issues there. So yeah, I think it'll be a fairly comfortable ride for Djokovic through the last eight. And Hurkacz, I mean, has had some extremely impressive results since winning the Miami Open. Obviously, earlier in the year in March, he backed up with a semi-final run in Wimbledon, and also made the quarters, the Canadian Open. So I think we've seen on the quicker surfaces, he's definitely someone that'll be overlooked, as I have a couple of times in the past when making predictions. So I think he's got a good chance here. Also, I think made the last 16 in Cincinnati last tournament, where he lost to Carreño Busta in 2 tiebreaks, so not a bad result there either. I think you're looking at his draw: Igor Gerasimov, Martin Fucsovics, then potentially Lorenzo Sonego in the third round before fourth round against Matteo Berrettini. But Berrettini's only played one tournament since reaching the Wimbledon final, which was in Cincinnati. He'd come back from an injury there, and he got through one round before losing to Auger-Aliassime. Fanini and Ilya Ivashka, other players in that section. Ivashka in good form, but I think Hurkacz is, for me, the most likely player to come through there.
Yeah, and for myself, I've actually gone for a Novak Djokovic and Hubert Hurkacz quarterfinal. Once again, like yourself, Djokovic, I weirdly don't think this is the easiest draw for Djokovic I've seen. I mean, you just look immediately at that second round, likely against Jan Lennard's Struff, and you think, Struff is a very good player. I think if Zverev or Tsitsipas or someone had that section, you'd look and think, oh, there's potential banana skins there. But with Novak, you just feel like he comes up against those kind of players who are potential banana skins and proved to be anything but. So, despite some very good players in that section of the draw, I don't see anything other than Djokovic coming through. Section 2, I mean, I thought long and hard about Hurkacz versus Berrettini, and I did decide on who, but Hurkacz in the end is had a great year so far, and I just expect him to carry it on. Obviously, Berrettini's he comes off the back of a very strong Wimbledon showing in the last Grand Slam, making the final, putting up a good fight of it in the final against Djokovic as well. And he's done well at the US Open in the past. It seems the courts seem to be playing quite fast in qualifying. Obviously, the show courts can be very different to how the courts play in the first. In qualifying those outdoor courts before they've even got any action on them. But at the moment, it does seem like quite a fast court that benefits Berrettini, but it does also benefit Hurkacz because he's also got a big power behind serve, big +1 shots. He's also very smart with his volleys as well. So I see a match between those two being competitive. There's obviously other players in that section, such as you've mentioned, Sonego, Fognini, very good players that can put up a fight. But I have also got Hurkacz coming through. But moving on now to your quarterfinals between Section 3 and Section 4. Once again, the same thing. Who have you got and how have you got there?
Yeah, well, I've gone for Alexander Zverev against Pablo Carreño Busta for that second quarterfinal. And I think looking at Zverev's draw, I don't think you'll be too disappointed. I mean, for me, yeah, there's some dangerous names in there, but with Sam Querrey first up, of course, a dangerous opponent, but I don't think we've seen him at his best probably for a couple of years, and I'll be surprised if he was really able to give Zverev too much trouble there, unless, Zverev was well below his best, then, potentially look at Puig or Ramos Vinolas in the second round. I don't see any issues there in Zverev's form. Alexander Bublik, maybe in the third round, is the seeded player who meet there, and the most likely players. He's had a really good year, Bublik, has made some pretty steady progress. Did beat Zverev in Rotterdam earlier in the year, but I think in best of 5, I'm not sure Bublik would have the discipline to stop Zverev playing as well as he is currently. So I think I really don't see Zverev being stopped, certainly before the fourth round, where I think he would have a ton of test in Jannik Sinner, most likely. Gael Monfils, also someone not overlooking that in that mini section with Sinner, who's seen a bit of a revival from in the last 2 tournaments, making the quarters in Cincinnati in the last 16 and the quarters in Toronto in the last 16 in Cincinnati. So it's good to see Monfils playing well again. Definitely could get through Sinner, but Sinner we saw winning the title in Washington, I think might be ready for a decent run here. And it could really be an interesting match if he faces Zverev, but I do think Zverev will just be a bit too strong here. And Carreño Busta in the next section, I think, is a pretty tough section to call, but I've gone with the bronze medalist from Tokyo, who backed up with a good run at the quarters in Cincinnati, where he took a pretty heavy loss to Daniel Medvedev. But I do think it's a challenging draw with a qualifier first up, but then Seb Korda in the second round could be really tough, and potentially a Pelka in the third round would be most likely. Lorenzo Musetti's in there as well. I think it would be a Pelka on current form. And then in the fourth round, I mean, the other mini section is also got some really tough names in there. You've got Denis Shapovalov, but he has really been out of form since his fantastic run at Wimbledon. He's lost 4 matches in a row. Hard for me to pick him right now to make a deep run. Karen Khachanov, who has really found some good form since Wimbledon, backed up, obviously getting the silver medal at the Olympic Games, and has played some decent tennis on the hard course since then in America. But he's got a tough first round, and Lloyd Harris as well. So tough to call that section. I just think Carreño Busta, the consistency we've seen from him, the impressive results really on, I was going to say on hard course, but including winning the Hamburg title since Wimbledon. Just since Wimbledon, he has been in really good form. So I would just back him to come through there and to a last day meeting with Zverev.
Yeah, and it's looking like one of those podcasts so far because I've picked the exact same quarterfinal as you again. Alexander Zverev versus Pablo Carreño booster. So just starting off with Zverev, we can't overlook his form in the last few tournaments. I mean, once again, we have got that issue of the off-court allegations against him. You don't know how that's going to affect his tennis. You know, I've already mentioned in his last podcast, if you want to watch it, I've already gone over this ground. I don't want to go over it too much again about how it affects me watching his tennis. You know, I just don't enjoy watching those matches anymore. But you know, the tennis, the level he's produced in the last few weeks. You look at those other names in that section, and you do look at some dangerous players like Alex Bublik, like Gael Monfils, Yannick Sinner, all playing a good level of tennis. I mean, Yannick Sinner managed to get one of the titles in the run up to this tournament. But you just can't look past the level of tennis that Alexander Zverev has been producing recently. And then moving on to section 4, like yourself, I mean, Denis Shapovalov, it was hard to overlook him, but I have overlooked him in the end. I think just because the consistency of performance from Carreño boosted recently, the confidence and Olympic bronze medal must bring him, and backing it up with some long runs. I mean, Riley Opelka, always dangerous on a hard court, on any court that's playing quite fast. Karen Khachanov obviously did very well at the Olympics himself. There's players in there that do make you think, but I just had that feeling about Carreño Busta. He's been playing very well. He must be buzzing off that win against Djokovic to get that Olympic bronze medal, and I expect him to carry it into the US Open. I'm moving on into section 5 and section 6 now, and we don't usually record this. We usually plan to record after the draw comes out, but by the time we record, the qualifiers are usually being placed. Now, we've got a lot of empty spaces in the draws we're looking at, aren't we, Ewan? But still, I'm not sure how much difference qualifiers / lucky losers would make to us predictions, so we have managed to predict anyway. So who have you got coming through section 5 and section 6?
Yeah, there is definitely a section here with a lot of qualifiers marked in. But yeah, I've gone for the 2 highest seeds, Andrei Rublev and Stefanos Tsitsipas, to make that third quarterfinal. I think starting with Rublev's draw, I don't think it's an easy draw, but for the first, I mean, yeah, like I was say, qualifier first up, you'd expect them to come through, and then Pedro Martinez or James Duckworth in the second round isn't bad. So I think those first 2 rounds, I don't see any problems. For Rublev, he obviously had a great result in Cincinnati, reaching the final just last week, where he got his first career win against Daniel Medvedev. So that's definitely a huge win for Rublev, who he hadn't won a set against before then. I think to see him continuing on there with probably Francis Tiafoe in the third round, who's shown he's a very dangerous player, particularly in the early rounds of big tournaments. He's pulled off some big upsets, including against Tsitsipas at Wimbledon in the first round recently. That would be a tough match, but I think I would back Rublev. Filip Krajinovic is another player in there, but I would expect Tiafoe to get through to that mean. We've seen some really good signs from him recently. And in the fourth round, I think you could see most likely Felix Auger-Aliassime or Roberto Bautista Agut. But Bautista Agut's got Nick Kyrgios first up, which, I mean, is definitely one to watch in the first round. Obviously, we don't know what to expect from Kyrgios after we saw a really good return from him at Wimbledon after we haven't seen him since the Australian Open. But since then, it's been a little bit disappointing. Haven't really seen much from him on the North American hard courts. Didn't play in Cincinnati, possibly isn't 100% fit, but that's definitely one to watch out for, and I think it's one that Bautista Agut could potentially come unstuck in. Kyrgios always dangerous when he's an underdog. Auger-Aliassime had a good run in Cincinnati, got back on track a little bit after a disappointing post-Wimbledon run where he had a great breakthrough. So I think I'll probably go with Auger-Aliassime to get through that fourth round with Rublev, but for Rublev to edge that. And in the next section, I think Tsitsipas has got a very interesting one first up again there, and Andy Murray. It's a really tough one for Murray to draw Tsitsipas in the first round, but it's definitely going to be an interesting one to watch. That I believe that's the first meeting. It's going to be a first meeting between the two, so I'm looking forward to seeing that one, even if it is a really tough one for Murray, but it could be an interesting match. Then Tsitsipas would likely play Adrian Manarino in the second round before third round against Cam Norrie and Carlos Alcaraz, which is another really interesting first round tie, and those two are the most likely to, I think, to get through to Tsitsipas in the third round. I'd maybe even go with Alcaraz on current form, but he could be a bit tired from his Winston-Salem run, where he's currently still in action. Then in the fourth round, it could be Ugo Humbert, play Tsitsipas has had some trouble with. He's lost to him twice, but did finally get the win against him in Toronto to avenge that Olympics loss. You had recently Benoit Paire also in that section, who, like Monfils, has had a bit of a revival at the two Masters 1000s in North America. So Paire could be someone to watch out for. I think it would be Humbert to meet Tsitsipas in the last 16 and Tsitsipas to beat him again.
Yeah, and we've done it again, Ewan. We've done it again. Andrei Rublev versus Stefanos Tsitsipas is my pick as well. And once again, for many of the same reasons that you've mentioned yourself. So I will say in Rublev's section, I did think a lot about Roberto Bautista Agut. You know, he's good on hard courts. His defense is fantastic, and sort of defensive styles can flourish at the US Open. But then once again, that Nick Kyrgios first round, and Nick Kyrgios doesn't look fit. He doesn't look fit enough with how he's been, how he pulled out of that match against Andy Murray, which was a shame to not have that match. I was really looking forward to it. And we know what Kyrgios can be like in terms of getting through one or two rounds and then pulling up with injury. He had that in that match against Felix Auger-Aliassime at Wimbledon. But in the first round, Nick Kyrgios is such a dangerous prospect that I can't possibly back Bautista Agut because I know that he could just be gone after one match. Felix Auger-Aliassime obviously gives you something to think about, but Andrei Rublev just has the consistency of performance over Felix at the moment. And like you say, TFO, we've seen some really positive signs from him recently. So he is one that I'm thinking could be an outsider for this quarterfinal. Especially part of my thinking on Rublev was, well, we know he wins 250s and 500s, but those longer runs at the slams and the Masters 1000s, they're what's elusive to him at the moment. But having double checked, it's the quarterfinal round that is where Rublev kind of gets to win slams and then doesn't get any further. So there's no problem with picking Rublev for the quarterfinal. So I have picked Rublev to make it to the quarterfinal. And then in section 6, I mean, I'd love anything but to visit Tsitsipas for the quarterfinal because he comes up against Andy Murray in the first round. And as much as I do quite like Stefanos, I much prefer Andy Murray. Andy Murray is the reason I started watching tennis. Of course, I prefer Andy Murray. So I'd love to be predicting a Rublev versus Andy Murray quarterfinal right now, but I can't possibly do that based on the level of performance from Tsitsipas for most of 2021, reaching that Roland Garros final where he took two sets off Djokovic. I know that's kind of ancient history now with how quickly tennis moves, but he has been. After a disappointing Wimbledon, he has managed to get back on it a little bit. He had a good run at Cincinnati where it just fell with a really hard battle, a really competitive battle, and a good level of tennis against Alexander Zverev, who we know is one of the most informed players on the tour right now. So yeah, I think Tsitsipas in that section 6, he just stands out as a person to come through that section. So we'll move on, and I'm hoping this is where we may get a bit of variety in his picks because I've done something a little bit out there on one of these sections. So let's see, section 7, section 8, which two players make it through to the quarterfinal?
Well, I've gone with Casper Ruud against Daniel Medvedev, so I'm guessing we might have a difference there. But I mean, yeah, on that first section, I've gone with Ruud, who is the highest seed, but I don't feel by any means a definitive pick or the definitive clear best player in the section. But I have gone with him. I mean, just to go through his draw, Jo-Wilfried Tsonga, first up, we know what a fantastic player Tsonga's been and what a career he's had, but he's really been hampered by injuries in recent years. I don't think he's played since Wimbledon, and before that, he'd barely played this year. So I think Ruud comes through there. You would have a good second round against either a qualifier or to Tabiner, who's more of a clay court specialist before the third round with Alejandro Davidovich Fokina, which could be really interesting. That's who Ruud lost to in 5 sets at the French Open, a match he probably should have won. So that's going to potentially be an interesting rematch, which I think will happen, given Davidovich Fokina's got what looks like a fairly kind draw to get at that stage. So that'll be an interesting rematch. I'm just going to back Ruud to get revenge there this time, given what we've seen from him making the back-to-back quarterfinals in North America and also carrying on his fantastic run on the clay. He's got to be confident right now. And then Ruud in the 4th round would most likely play either Diego Schwartzman or John Isner. John Isner is someone I strongly considered to get to the quarterfinals from this section. I was extremely impressed by what I saw. Well, firstly, with him winning another Atlanta Open title, a tournament he's been dominant at. I think that was the 6th one. Then he made the semis in Toronto and the 3rd round in Cincinnati, but he really did look to be struggling physically by the end of that run in Cincinnati. And the guy is 36. I think he's playing some of the best tennis of his career, but I just question, with only about a week he's had to recover from that in Cincinnati. He really did look to be struggling. By the end of the match, he lost to Benoit Paire. And then here Isner's got Brandon Nagashima in the 1st round, who's another really bright young American prospect who saw reach back-to-back finals in Los Cabos and Atlanta, I believe, earlier in this hardcore swing. So that's a tough 1st round. He did beat Isner in Los Cabos. So Isner's definitely someone in terms of level I was tempted by, but physically I'd question whether he's going to come through 4 best-of-5 set matches given the tennis he's played recently. Schwartzman as well in there, definitely not to be overlooked. He's made 2 US Open quarterfinals, sorry, but that was before the courts changed surface last year, and last year he did lose in the 1st round. Hasn't quite had the grace yet, and not the greatest results in Toronto and Cincinnati. Looked okay, but lost in the 3rd round both times. So I would say maybe Ruud against Isner in the 4th round. I would just back Ruud to come through that, given how well I thought he handled playing Riley Opelka, obviously very similar player John Isner in Cincinnati. And then the next section was, for me, much easier to pick. I've gone with Medvedev. I think it's a really, really good draw for Medvedev. Couldn't really have been any better. I think Richard Gasquet in the 1st round, Dominic Koepfer probably in round 2. No problems there. Marin Cilic in round 3 could be tricky. I think they met at the same stage in Wimbledon. Obviously, Cilic led by 2 sets to love before Medvedev really did produce an impressive comeback. The only time I think he's come from 2 sets down. But Cilic is, I think, definitely a better player on grass. Medvedev, I think, on hard courts, the gap is bigger between them. And Cilic, I think, his level is still there at times, but the consistency isn't. Mentally, I'm not sure right now he's got it in him to really pull off that big upset at a slam. Could be an interesting one though. And then in the 4th round, Grigor Dimitrov, who saw signs of life from in Cincinnati, but he did lose to Medvedev pretty convincingly in the 3rd round after he had two great wins, Dimitrov, including against Bautista Agut. I think it could be Dimitrov to get through that because it's a fairly kind section. There's Dan Evans in there as well, but he's been out of form since he was supposed to pull out of the Olympics with COVID. Hasn't really looked right since then. It's been a real struggle for Evans, so I'm not expecting too much from him there. And Thiago Monteiro in the 1st round, not necessarily an easy one. Physically tough, left-handed player. Evans has had problems against lefties in slams in the past couple of years. Also, Marcos Giron in there, Alexei Popyrin, but I think probably Dimitrov to come through the 4th round and Medvedev to be too good for anyone in that section.
Yeah, so as I hoped, this has been where we've got a little bit of variation. You said you was tempted by John Isner. I've gone with John Isner for a quarterfinal. That's counting on him having a bit of a rest coming into the tournament and hopefully coming in with good fitness. You look at Diego Schwartzman. He's reached the quarterfinal stage of the US Open a couple of times in the past, but like you say, his results recently in 2021 on the hard courts. I mean, he's been a decent hard court player in the past, but he seems to have struggled a bit this year in particular. So I think I'd back John Isner at his home slam on a surface that Isner manages to produce good tennis a lot of the time. And I'd expect him through to the 4th round. And like yourself, I mean, that Casper Ruud, Alejandro Davidovich Fokina battle, that looks a really good battle. Between 2 young guys, 2 very impressive young guys, I'd really like that match to come about. And and I could see it going either way. But I see John Isner being the kind of player that's just a real big banana skin for either of those young guys breaking through. A player that's going to give them a lot of different things to think about than what they have to think about against most other guys on the tour. So yeah, I think John Isner is the kind of player that can sneak through to the quarterfinal. Not to ruin my picks after that, but I don't see him going much further than that. And then moving on into Section 8, I've gone with Daniel Medvedev as well. So I've gone for an Isner Medvedev quarterfinal. Once again, like yourself, I don't see too many big problems for Medvedev in Section 8. The level of tennis is produced the last few years. I don't think any of the guys come close to him really. I mean, not Marin Cilic, a prime Marin Cilic maybe comes close to Medvedev, but not Marin Cilic now. Grigor Dimitrov, the man who flatters to deceive. I just don't think he's got the consistency that Medvedev has produced recently. I love Dimitrov's tennis, and he does seem to be playing quite all right at the moment, quite a good level for himself, getting back towards there. But unless he produces his very best tennis on the day, I feel like I'd back Medvedev to win any match between those two. And just one little note I want to make on this section: I haven't been going too in depth on certain little matchups that can come up in sections, but I'd love to see a Dan Evans versus Grigor Dimitrov match. I just think that'd be such a fun match to watch. They've got quite similar game styles. They both love to use that slice. Both great variety. Both got the one-handed backhand. I feel like it'd be like watching, two guys that have a very similar game style. And I feel like they'd find each other very awkward opponents for that reason. I mean, we talk about Dimitrov's problems with Federer. Seems to be a bit of a problem for him coming up against Federer, and that's everyone. I mean, I remember a time when he was nicknamed Baby Fed because of his game style. So I could see Dan Evans causing a few problems for Grigor Dimitrov, to be honest. So I'd love to see that battle happen. I really hope it does. Before we go on to predict what happens in our quarterfinals in the men and what happens in the deeper period of the tournament, we'll go on to pick out our quarterfinalists in the women's side of the draw, starting with the quarterfinal between section 1 and 2. Who have you got, Ewan?
Yeah, in this one I've gone for Ash Barty against Belinda Bencic. Going through Barty's draw, I think it's a pretty good draw that Barty will be pretty happy with. Obviously coming in off the back of winning the Cincinnati title, just continuing a fantastic form on all surfaces, all levels. Vera Zvonareva in the first round. A former Grand Slam finalist, but into her late 30s now. I don't see too many problems there. Then, obviously, I think most likely second round, a really talented young player, Clara Tauson. Again, I would expect Barty to be too strong. Veronika Kudermetova most likely in the third round. Sorana Castera in there potentially as well. He's had some good results, but Kudermetova not being at her best. Who's the seed in there? And either way, I don't see any issues for Barty there before the fourth round, where she would then meet probably a tougher opponent in either Jennifer Brady, Karolina Muchova, or Sara Sorribes Tormo. Tough to call between those three who would actually make the last 16. Brady's obviously had fantastic results at the last two hardcore slams, reaching the Australian Open final this year and the semis at the US Open last year, but we haven't seen much from her really since. Muchova has had some great results at the slams as well, but has had a few injury problems, hasn't played too much outside those tournaments. It's been a bit up and down for her, I think, physically. So Sorribes Tormo is someone who I think potentially here could take advantage. She's had some really consistent results and performances, and actually beat Barty at the Olympics, which was a huge upset in straight sets. So tough one to call that. I would maybe go Sorribes Tormo to make the fourth round, actually. But I think Barty will be too strong, and if that matchup did come about, she would get the revenge for Tokyo. And Belinda Bencic, I think I've gone with to continue her form from winning the Olympic gold. We saw her back it up a bit in Cincinnati, where she made the quarterfinals. Lost to Jill Teichmann, who went on and reached the final, but had some good performances there. Bencic, to show that she is confident, and clearly she's got to be buoyed by that Olympics win. And it's not an easy draw. I think Arantxa Rus in the first round and then potentially Coco Vando in the second round. I don't see too many problems there. But then when you get to the third round stage. Jessica Pegula, who made the semis in Montreal, or potentially Iga Swiatek, who we haven't seen play too much since Wimbledon. Haven't seen the greatest results of her since the Kligo season, but I do think she could be a factor here. But I'm just going to go with Bencic. I think she's feeling good right now and confident, so I think she'll get through that quarterfinal.
Yeah, I've gone with the same quarterfinalist as you, Ash Barty versus Belinda Bencic. I weirdly think that Ash Barty's got a really awkward section for a number one seed. Like he's circling up against Zverev in the first round. I'd expect her to come through that no problem, but it's an awful first round to have as the number one seed against a former Slam champion. And then in there, like you say, Clara Towson, she's had some good results. She looks like a very promising young player. For an unseeded player, Sorana Castell must be one of the worst unseeded players you can get in your section. Jennifer Brady with some really good results on hard courts recently, as you've mentioned, especially the last two hard court slams. So an awkward section, but one that I see Ash Barty coming through. And section 2, I think you mentioned Belinda Bencic being buoyed by that Olympic gold medal, and I very much see it the same way. An Olympic gold medal on hard courts, getting some really good results against top quality players. I just see that doing nothing but great things for her confidence. I mean, I always touch on Iga Swiatek because I do like her game, and I do tend to predict her going far. And recently she's maybe gone out 1 or 2 rounds earlier than I've tended to predict for her. I'd expect her to make that 4th round, I'd say, but I just think Belinda Bencic must be going into this tournament with more confidence than Swiatek right now, and I think confidence is a factor, and for that reason I've got Bencic through to the quarterfinal against Ash Barty. So section 3, section 4, once again, and as we look at it, a few empty spaces as we wait for qualifiers and lucky losers to be placed. So what have you managed to predict amongst all those empty spaces?
Yeah, I've gone for an old Czech quarterfinal here between Karolina Pliskova and Pera Kvitova. I think with Pliskova, this is probably the more confident I've been picking her to have a deep run at a tournament for a while, which I mean she's obviously going to lose early now. But no, I mean Pliskova is hard to predict, but I think really good signs from her actually. Even if you go back to the Rome final where she did have that really disappointing loss, but it was a good run, and then obviously had a fantastic run at the Wimbledon final. Maybe went out a little bit earlier than expected the Olympics, but then making the final in Montreal and the semis in Cincinnati, I think just fantastic results at the lead-in events, clearly in great form on the American hard courts and confident. So I think Pliskova, looking at the section, it's not a bad one with Kay McNally, Amanda Anisimova in the first couple of rounds, some talented American players, but not really seen any great results from them, particularly Anisimova is well below where I would expect her right now. Petra Martic, then maybe in the 3rd round, who's a talented player, but I'd expect Pliskova to be too good for. The 4th round, I think, is where it could be the biggest test in Paula Badoza, who's had some really strong showings on a number of surfaces, a number of tournaments, including in Montreal, I believe. So that will be a tough one. Anastasia Pavlyuchenkova in there as well, certainly someone not to overlook in a Grand Slam, has made a lot of quarterfinals, but I think Pliskova is playing the best tennis in that section right now, and I'd expect her to get through there. And in section 4, I think it's a tough one to call, really. I've gone with Pera Kvitova, even though we haven't really seen a big run for him at a slam in a while. I think it's almost due to happen, and just a positive result in Cincinnati, making the quarterfinals, but then she was forced to withdraw during that match against Angelique Kerber with another injury, but hopefully it's nothing too serious. I think she said afterwards that it isn't expected to be, so it was good to see her back on track there, and hopefully if she is fit again, I've got her coming through this section. It's not an easy one. Herzog first up, Danga Kovanic in the 2nd round, but I can see her being okay there. Then it would get tougher with probably Maria Sakkari in the 3rd round, Katerina Siniakova in there as well, Moda Kostyuk, but I'll back her just to come through. And then the 4th round, it could be Bianca Andreescu or Elena Ostapenko, but I think Andreescu, it's good to see her back playing again at the 2 events pre-US Open, but we really saw Fall lose early. is good that she's fit again, but we just haven't seen any real form from her all this year, to be honest. And I'm not expecting that really to change here. We're playing at the US Open for the first time since she won it in 2019, but there's just a lack of matches under her belt. And Ostapenko, a very unpredictable player. I just think Kvitova could, if healthy, which we expect now, be the most reliable player in this section.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a bit of variation here where I've also gone with Karolina Pliskova to make the quarterfinal, but I've got her up against Maria Sakkari instead. I mean, looking at that section 3, I think I haven't really got much analysis here other than that. I think Pliskova is just clearly the best player on form in general in that section. There is talented players in there, but I mean, Pavlyuchenkova, I think we haven't seen much from her since that Roland Garros final. Anisimova, she had a great breakout a couple of years back, but I think sadly she's had a few injury issues and things like that, and we just haven't seen any sort of form or long runs from her since then. Katie McNally, very talented young American player, but still got some way off challenging yet, I think. Tom Aljanovic, once again, probably one of the stronger unseeded players to have in your section, but I still see Pliskova as quite a level above her at the moment, and that's just it. I've got Pliskova as a level above, or on hard courts, a definite a level above anyone in her section. As for section 4, I think this was quite an awkward section to pick through. You touched on Andreescu yourself, a former champion here only a couple of years ago, 2019. Really hoped she'd go on and do big things after that, but sadly has just had so many injury issues. I think she's going to get over them and return to being a slam contender in the future, but we just haven't seen it from her yet this year. Every time she has looked to get a bit of form under her belt again, she's had some kind of issue arise again, which has been really sad to see. Petra Kvitova, obviously a big part of my thinking, but I've gone with Sakkari. I think just as a wild card pick for myself, just something different. I think Sakkari, we've probably touched on her in almost every podcast we've done this year as someone who put together some form in WTA 500s, WTA 1000. She's had a few long runs. We've seen less of that of her recently, and I feel like we always predicted her to do well and finally break through in a slam because of her good form in smaller tournaments. She hasn't had that great form in smaller tournaments recently. Well, maybe now when we're least expecting it, she'll finally come through and make that really long slam run. So I've gone with Sakkari. She had a good run at Roland Garros as well. I should say that she did have a good run at Roland Garros, and I feel like she could have a chance of getting a good hardcourt run at the US Open. Moving on to the bottom half of the draw, your section 5 and 6 quarterfinals. Who have you got? How did you get there?
Yeah, I've gone with Elena Rybakina against Naomi Osaka for this next quarterfinal. Which, firstly, on Rybakina's section, I think this is a really tough section to call. There's a lot of very dangerous players in here, a lot of good players, but with varying degrees of form. So starting up with Rybakina's draw, I think Sasnovich in the first round, Caroline Garcia in the second round. I can't see too many problems there. Again, two talented players, particularly Caroline Garcia, but really haven't seen we've seen her well below her best for some time now. And Rybakina, we've just seen some extremely strong results from quarterfinals, Roland Garros, quarterfinals at Wimbledon, semifinals at the Olympics. And she has played on the hard courts since then without as much success, but I just think we've seen strong results for the big tournaments. So after those first 2 rounds, it would be potentially Simona Halep, who's on the comeback trail. We saw a return in Canada and then pull out of Cincinnati. So I think still question marks over whether Halep's 100% fit. I'm not expecting too much from her here. And she's also got a really tough first round in Camilla Giorgi, obviously who won in Canada. So that, yeah, I'm not expecting Halep to go too far there. Ann Lee, another good player in that section, the young American player. But Spitalina and Kasatkina would be the possible fourth round opponents for Rybakina. Spitalina obviously winning the bronze medal at the Olympics. A fantastic result for her. We then saw her fall early in Cincinnati, but I think she's the most likely player for sure to get through the fourth round. Obviously, Kazakhina is very dangerous, but there's also Svetlana Korongova and Marketa Vondrushova in there. So there's a lot of dangerous players in that section, seeded and unseeded. I just think on form, I'm going to go with Elena Rybakina. The amount of winning she's done this year, including at the big events, I think might just carry her through. And I've gone for Naomi Osaka to meet her there. Obviously, we've seen a return after what happened at the French Open. Unfortunately, then she missed Wimbledon and didn't have the greatest result at the Olympics or in Cincinnati. But I feel personally at the US Open, she's won twice. We've seen at the hardcourt slam, she's been such a dominant force. I just can't write her off. Obviously, it's difficult to know exactly where she's at, but I feel she's playing. She has returned. I think we did see have a really good win in Cincinnati against Coco Gauff. So I think it's not a bad draw either. I think she can play a win at this tournament with Marie Buskova first round, possibly a qualifier in the second round, then third round against most likely Yulia Putintseva. Fourth round would definitely be tougher. Angelique Kerber, Coco Gauff, Madison Keys, and Sloane Stephens all in that section. So I think that's a really difficult one to call. I mean, I'd maybe go with Angelique Kerber, who's had a bit of a revival. Obviously, great run at Wimbledon and Cincinnati, making the semifinals of both those events. Didn't play the Olympics. Kerber is definitely someone to watch out for, as is Coco Gauff, who had a good run in Canada, and obviously lost to Osaka in Cincinnati, I think in the third round. So second round it was rather. So I do think Osaka is going to get back on track here. I think she can, as I said, play in the first few rounds, and I think maybe that will then be ready to hold off that strong fourth round opponent.
Yeah, well, all year I've been underrating Elena Svitolina. I haven't predicted much for her because I just feel like she didn't have the consistency of results recently. But her run at the Olympics has made me rethink that. I'm ready to start considering her as a contender again. So my quarterfinal I've got is Elena Svitolina versus Naomi Osaka. First up, looking at Svitolina's section, Rybakina was my first thought. And in the end, when I was thinking, it was a toss-up between Svitolina and Rybakina. But I remembered Svitolina's really strong run at the US Open in 2019, how good she looked. And I just feel like if she's stringing her best tennis together again, then maybe she can have another run like that. I'm sad to say Simona Halep did not really enter my thinking at the moment. It's just she's had such a long injury layoff. I think if she comes through that first round against Camila Giorgi, who we know took that really strong result recently, winning the title in Canada, that'd be a good tournament for her just to return and get a couple of match wins. A second, third round would be a good tournament for her when she's still so early into her injury recovery. So I haven't been ready to predict Simona Halep to go far just yet, and I've gone with Svitolina to come through that section into a match against Naomi Osaka. And I will say I was also quite conflicted on this one just because of since her return, we saw her take quite a disappointing early exit at the Olympics. We saw, like you say, a really good win against Coco Gauff, but didn't manage to quite follow it up the way that you'd like to see. I'd still say that I feel at the US Open she will string together some really good tennis. I still think the signs are there that she is, I think, the closest to Ash Barty really in women's tennis in terms of level of performance, of level of talent at the moment. I think when Ash Barty drops from that number one spot, I still see it being Naomi Osaka that takes it from her. And obviously coming into here defending a title, I feel like she's gonna put together a really strong performance. There is strong players in there. Another possible tie against Coco Gauff, I'm sure, a mouthwatering prospect for the American fans. But Goff would have to come through some very good players to get there. As you've mentioned yourself, you see Angelique Kerber being maybe one of your biggest factors away from Naomi Osaka in that section. And you would I'd probably say that myself in her revival in 2021, especially with that strong Wimbledon result and the results just before and just after the grass court season. But no, I've gone with Naomi to come through. So looking into section 7 and section 8, the final sections of this women's draw, before we go on to look at what we think might happen over the final week, who are your final women's quarterfinalists?
I've gone for Barbora Krejcikova against Arena Sabalenka for this quarterfinal matchup. So yeah, just starting on Krejcikova's section, I think it's definitely some challenging players in there, but the first 2 rounds don't look too bad for me. And Mikhail and Alexandrova, or potentially Jo Connor, who we just haven't seen play a lot, has also been plagued by injuries. There's Kiki Mladenovic in there, obviously a talented player, but who's really underperformed for some time. So I don't see any problems in those first couple of hurdles. Then she'd potentially run into, it would be a qualifier at first. They were the second and third rounds that I was talking about. And then 4th round would be Gabia Muguruza, who she has a 1-1 head-to-head against. Muguruza, I mean, kind of expecting her to return form after she had such a fantastic start at the year, but it hasn't really happened after that. There's injuries that hit her in the clay court season. It's been pretty up and down since then without any really deep runs. So, and also a challenging first round she's got in Donna Vekic. I think there's no guarantee she comes through that. And also Victoria Azarenka in Muguruza's section there, who she would potentially meet in the 3rd round. Azarenka obviously made the semi-finals of this tournament last year, had a fantastic run and won the Cincinnati event, which was played at the US Open. So, I mean, clearly also a former US Open finalist before that. So Azarenka clearly a danger at this tournament on these courts. So I think it's a tough one to call there between Muguruza and Azarenka, who comes through the 4th round. I just think Krejcikova has had such outstanding results, really, on all surfaces, so consistent. Obviously, to go with the French Open win, she's backed it up with, I think, round of 16 at Wimbledon, round of 16 at the Olympics, quarterfinals, I believe, in Cincinnati, and also winning on home soil in Prague on hard courts. So I just think she's such a reliable player. Beating Muguruza before, I'm going to back Krejcikova come through there. And Sabalenka, again, I think she continues to knock on the door. Seen her make another slightly disappointing Olympics, but backed up with a quarterfinal run, I believe, in Cincinnati. I just think she's going to make another good run here. She has a pretty good draw. I think Stojanovic and then Bernarda Pera possibly in the 2nd round. Danielle Collins in the 3rd round could definitely be challenging with the form she's been in. I mean, that's not going to be easy. And then 4th round would be Ons Jabeur, who's obviously an extremely dangerous opponent, very talented, is having some fantastic results. But Sabalenka does lead that head-to-head 2-1. Also, Elise Mertens in there, but who hasn't been in the greatest of form lately, Mertens. So I think most likely Jabeur in the 4th round for Sabalenka, but I just think we'll see after Sabalenka broke that barrier of not making it past the 4th round at Wimbledon. I think we can see her do it again.
Yeah, so for myself, I've gone with an all Belarusian quarterfinal here. I've gone with Victoria Azarenka versus Arena Sabalenka. So once again, a fair bit of variation between us. I think we've tended to, on the women's side, pick one quarterfinalist the same and one quarterfinalist different. Just starting off with that Azarenka pick. Once again, Barbora Krejcikova. I agree with everything that you've said on her, and she was the other person that I really did think about in this section. Like you say, she's put together some really solid, some really consistent results, but instead of going for consistency of results, consistency of performances, I've gone for maybe peak performance. And Victoria Azarenka, she's won Grand Slams on hard courts before. She's got strong runs at the US Open in the past. She's won the Australian Open, as I've mentioned. So I'll go for someone who's been there and done that, rather than the person stringing together just consistent results at the moment. Garbine Muguruza, if we were recording this podcast in February, if the Australian Open was taking part in March, I'd have probably predicted her to maybe even win the tournament, but I don't see her really getting past. Clearly, I don't see her getting past the third round here because I picked Azarenka to come through the section. But I think if she came through that Azarenka match, I could see her fall into Krejcikova in the fourth round. But it's Azarenka for me to come through that section. And into section 8, Arena Sabalenka, the same pick as you. We've got players in there. You mentioned Danielle Collins. We saw her pick up a title recently. She'll have the home fans on her side. I can say that this time and be confident that it's right. I talked about Osaka having the home fans on her side in the Olympics when there was actually no fans in the stands. But no, Danielle Collins will have the home fans in the stands on her side. And it'd be good to see her get a good run in front of her home fans. I'm sure she'll manage to get through a few rounds at least, based on her performances at the moment. But Sabalenka, like you say, she finally made it past that slam fourth round, finally put together that really strong run at a slam at Wimbledon, and I expected to build on that because she's a fantastic player. She proves that at pretty much every tournament she plays at, and it's now time that she started proving it at the slams as well. So I'll have Sabalenka coming through there. So we'll move on into predicting as quarterfinals what will happen. And the later tournament. So starting off on the men's side again, we'll switch back to the men. The top half, first quarter final between we've both gone with Novak Djokovic, Hubert Hurkacz. How do you see that one panning out?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Djokovic to win that, but I don't think it would necessarily be straightforward. I think Hurkacz could be a difficult matchup for Djokovic. We've seen them play before. I think we mentioned on the podcast they've played before at Wimbledon. I think in 2019, and in I believe the third round, it was a difficult 4-set match for Djokovic. Hurkacz really troubled him, and he's made great strides since then. Hurkacz he's improved as a player. I think he's difficult to hit through even for a big guy, and also has the big serve, has solid ground strokes. Not some similarities you could say to Andy Murray. He's been compared to, and also Daniel Medvedev. Medvedev particularly has given Djokovic some problems. So I think it'll be a challenge, but I'll back Djokovic to win it. How do you see it?
So once again, I've gone with Novak Djokovic to come through it, and once again, I like yourself, I see it as quite an awkward battle for Djokovic. I can see Hurkacz maybe taking a set. I can see it going to 4 sets, maybe even 5, but I just think Djokovic will come through it in the end. I think it's going to be one of those where maybe Hurkacz takes a first set. You think, oh, is there a shock on the cards here? And then Djokovic just takes the next 3, as you sometimes see. I think it would be a good match, or it would be an entertaining match to watch. I agree with you. Hurkacz has some of the things that Djokovic often finds awkward, but he tends to come through those little challenges and get the win. So I'd see Djokovic progressing into the semi-final, and his semi-final opponent, once again, we've got the same quarter-finalists, Alexander Zverev, Carreño Busta. Which one of those meets Djokovic in that semi-final?
Yeah, I can't look past Zverev. He's won both previous meetings with Carreño Busta, including in the semi-finals here last year in 2020, where he came from 2 sets to love down to beat Carreño Busta. And Carreño Busta does have a really good record at the US Open, making the semis twice, including that one mentioned. But I just think Zverev, just the serve definitely gives him a big edge in that matchup. Wouldn't be an easy one with Carreño Busta's recent form, but I think Zverev carrying the momentum he's got from the Olympics and Cincinnati would have just a bit too much for Carreño Busta. Could definitely be caught off if he is below his best there, but I see Zverev winning.
Yeah, I'd say probably the same. Like you said, Carreño Busta, a really strong sort of pedigree at the US Open, a very good hard-court player, but the level of performance from Zverev at the moment, it's hard to look past him for the semi-final, that Olympic gold medal, that Cincinnati title, the win over Djokovic. You're thinking at the Olympics, just everything we've seen from Zverev recently points to him being a semi-finalist at the US Open. meeting Djokovic in that semi-final, so a replay possibly of the Olympics semi-final match. That could be an interesting one. We'll come on to discussing that later, but we'll continue to go through the quarterfinals. Andrei Rublev versus Stefanos Tsitsipas. We've both got the same one again. So how do you see that one panning out?
Yeah, I've gone for Tsitsipas to win that one. I think it would be a great match. Head-to-head's 4-3 Tsitsipas, which I think includes the next gen final. So I don't know if that really count that. The ATP obviously counted, but I've just gone with Tsitsipas to win that again. I just think he has just a bit more in his game than Rublev, maybe a bit more variety, the ability to come to the net, finish points, and just serves a bit better, bit of a stronger first serve and more reliable second serve, which can be a bit of a weakness for Rublev, which I think in this matchup can make Tsitsipas's returns being seen as something which can be a bit of a weakness on the quicker courts. But I think Rublev would have to really serve at his best to punish that. And I just think with Tsitsipas, we saw the back-to-back semi-finals he made in Canada and Cincinnati. Slightly disappointing losses he had in the end of both those, but still deep runs, and the level of tennis he produced was strong. So I would just have him to come through Rublev.
Yeah, I'm also picking Stefanos Tsitsipas, and the main reason I'm picking Tsitsipas, like you've mentioned, the very even head-to-head really, but the reason I see Tsitsipas coming through instead of Andrei Rublev is probably just that extra pedigree at the bigger tournaments, at the slams, looking at the ATP finals as well, factoring that into the equation, and even the Masters 1000s. I just think Zverev's quite clearly got that extra bit of pedigree at the bigger tournaments, so under the bigger pressure. So I'd go with Stefanos Tsitsipas over Andrei Rublev. So it's Steph in the semi-final for me as well. I'm moving on to his final quarter-final. To me, as we've both got, it's Stefanos Tsitsipas in the semi. I've got John Isner Medvedev. You've got Ruud Medvedev. So we've got a difference in quarter-finalists here, but I have a feeling we might have a similar semi-finalist.
Yeah, I think we might have. I've gone for Medvedev to beat Ruud, and I think this will be a fantastic run. First of all, if Ruud makes it the quarters, I think it could be the next step to carry on to make that first Grand Slam quarterfinal after the recent run he's been on, making the quarters on the hardcourt Masters 1000 events. So yeah, I think for Ruud to get there would be fantastic. But we did see in those quarters he played in Toronto and Cincinnati, he was well beaten by Tsitsipas and Zverev in both those. So when he really did run into those top five players, those real contenders for the title, he was outclassed. And I think, maybe to be expected, with it not being his best service and also with it being his, early from in terms of making that stage of hardcourt tournaments, he just isn't on the same level as those guys yet. Maybe we'll get there at some point, but I think Medvedev would definitely be too strong here.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100%. I mean, we'll go over it again. Daniel Medvedev, a bit of pedigree at the US Open, that fantastic first Grand Slam final against Rafa Nadal. That's probably when I became quite a big fan of Daniil Medvedev's game. I was aware of him. I was well aware of Daniil Medvedev before that final, but that's when I really saw that battling spirit and just the level that he can reach when he's got his tennis dialed in. So I think against that, as I've got it against John Isner, I feel like John Isner's a banana skin for those players, maybe those less experienced players for definite, that have a lot of talent, but I've faced with a very different proposition when we come up against John Isner. Medvedev has been around the block now, and he'll know how to deal with John Isner. I think even if it is Casper Ruud, as you've mentioned, I'd see Medvedev coming through that battle as well into the semi-final. So as we've got it as semi-finalists are very much the same. Djokovic versus Zverev, Tsitsipas versus Medvedev. I'd say go through both of your semi-finalists, pick through both of them. And who are your two finalists?
Yeah. Well, I've gone for Djokovic to beat Zverev and Medvedev to beat Tsitsipas. So yeah, I'll just have Djokovic to end Zverev's winning run there, which is carried from the Olympics. Obviously, it included that win over Djokovic in the semi-finals of the Olympics. I think Djokovic is definitely going to be out for revenge after that. He'll be hurt by that. And as good as a performance I thought that was from Zverev. I don't think Djokovic was at his best for most of that match. I think he started very well, but I think he really did fade physically and also mentally. I mean, he talked about the exhaustion he felt afterwards, and I think, yeah, I've got to believe him on that. He said that he was also dealing with a couple of injuries. He obviously hasn't played since then. He's taken the time off, didn't play at the Masters 1000 events. I think when we see him back here fresh, motivated, going for the Grand Slam, obviously a lot of pressure on him, but I can't see him losing twice in a big match in a row to Zverev, who, as much as I've been impressed by the results he's put together and the performances, still hasn't beaten a top 10 player in a Slam. And for this, he would probably be doing it. The first top 10 win is he ever going to be? Is he going to do against Djokovic in the US Open semi-finals? I couldn't personally bet on it. So, Djokovic has had the better of that head-to-head despite that recent meeting, including Australian Open quarterfinals this year, where he found a way to do it there without his best tennis even. So I'm expecting to see a good version of Djokovic here, though, and I think he'll just edge that. It won't be easy, though. I could see it being 4 or 5 sets. And Medvedev over Tsitsipas, I think he does like that head-to-head 6-2. Tsitsipas did take him out in the French Open semis, but I think definitely on hard courts, I can't overlook Medvedev. They met in the same stage at the Australian Open earlier this year. Medvedev won pretty convincingly in straight sets, although you've got to take into account that Steph beat Rafa Nadal in the previous round in 5 sets, which is the win of his career. So physically and emotionally, that probably took a lot of him. But I do think Medvedev, it's a really tough matchup for Tsitsipas on a quicker surface. I think he still is, despite getting the job done over him on clay. I think it's just a completely different match on clay. As on hard courts, I think Medvedev's still possibly in his head a bit, and I'll back him to come through there to meet Djokovic in the final. Yeah, again, I think as I've picked for 3 slams this year.
Yeah, obviously a repeat of the very first slam of the year. So ending the year of Grand Slams, how we started the year of Grand Slams with Novak Djokovic versus Daniil Medvedev. I've got the exact same thing. I've got Djokovic coming through that semi-final with Alexander Zverev. I mean, I'm not certain of this one, especially with the Olympics factored into my mind. Also, the fact that Djokovic was apparently struggling physically. I know a lot of time has passed. He's taken time to let his body recover, but I'm thinking if there's an underlying kind of thing happening to him physically there, could it rear its head again at the US Open? But I think that's all ifs, buts, and maybes. And I think if you're just taking it on face value and not trying to guess at Novak Djokovic's physical condition, in a Grand Slam match, in a best-of-5 match, you just always have to back Novak Djokovic against almost anyone on tour, on almost any surface on the tour. So I've gone with Djokovic, much like yourself. Very much on track for the calendar year slamming, making it to the final, but a very awkward opponent in the final for him in Daniil Medvedev. We expected a lot from that. In fact, before we talk about the final, I'll talk about the semi-final. Stefanos Tsitsipas versus Daniil Medvedev. We know Medvedev is a really difficult opponent for Tsitsipas. Tsitsipas has managed to turn it around a little bit recently. 2 of the last 3 matches are actually going in Steph's favour. A round-robin match at the ATP Finals and that Roland Garros quarter-final. I think the fact that Roland Garros was on clay, obviously has to be factored into the equation. On hard courts, Medvedev seems to have another level on Tsitsipas. A battle that's got history, a battle that's had bad blood, but a battle that Medvedev tends to win. So we've both got the same final, like we said, Novak Djokovic versus Daniil Medvedev. Medvedev, as you'll agree, an awkward opponent for Djokovic, but how do you see that one panning out? Do you see Noel closing out the calendar year slam?
I do. I've gone for it, and again, I was somewhat tempted with Medvedev. Again, I'm definitely not overlooking him. I think it could be a great match, but I mean, we thought the same of the Australian Open, and I think for that reason, I can't pick Medvedev to win it. I do think, again, I can't see it being straight sets. I know we said this last time, but I can't see it being that straightforward. again, I think with the level Medvedev's produced in, in the last two tournaments, I mean, winning one, making the semis, I think he loves this tournament. Djokovic, it has been a problematic tournament at times from in the past. Obviously, we know with the default last year, with the injury, I believe the year before, and also losing 5 of the 8 finals, he's won it. It hasn't been the dominant slam you'd expect for him to be on hard courts, and obviously with the pressure of the calendar slam, as you mentioned, some potential physical problems. But I think for me, for him to get through this final, I can't back against him once he gets there. I really do think it would be potentially a great match. Again, Medvedev does give him a lot of problems, but in a Grand Slam final, I just can't back against Djokovic, even with the pressure of the calendar slam and the Grand Slam record, 21st men's slam on the line. I'm going to back him to get it done.
I'd agree. I'd agree 100%. I think we looked at that Medvedev-Djokovic battle at the Australian Open, where Medvedev seemed to be playing some brilliant tennis all the way through the tournament, and we thought, could we finally see sort of not only one of the other guys, one of the next gen come through and win a slam, but do it against one of the big three, take down Djokovic in the process. And I feel like there was a strong feeling that it could actually happen. We didn't think it will happen, but we thought it could happen. And I think I said that Medvedev, he might not win, but he at least takes that final to 5. It ended up being a straightforward 3. So what I'm thinking is, this match, this is a straightforward 3. Djokovic takes it easily. 6-3, 6-2, 6-love. Medvedev's gone by the final set. If I predict that, maybe something very different will happen, and Medvedev will at least make it 5, and it'll be a very entertaining final to watch. So yeah, I've got Djokovic winning in 3 straight, 3 quite easy sets is what I've got. And obviously closing out the calendar year, slamming the process and moving ahead of Rafael Nadal and Roger Federer as the first one to make it to 21 Grand Slams in their career. But moving on from the men now into the final week of the women's tournament, starting with us quarterfinalists. The first quarterfinal, we've got the same, Ash Barty versus Belinda Bencic. Who comes through that one for you?
Yeah, I've gone for Ash Barty to win that. I think it would be a good run again for Bencic to back up fantastic recent form on the hard courts from the Olympics. But I can't go against Barty, who won the title in Cincinnati and obviously won Wimbledon not too long ago. I think, the only tournament we haven't seen her really go deep in was the big tournament, was the French Open, where she was injured. So I just can't look past the world number 1 here. It could be an interesting match, that, but I would expect it to be a bit too strong for Bencic.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Bencic, we've mentioned buoyed by that Olympic gold medal, but I feel Ash Barty is coming in buoyed by winning the Masters 1000 in Cincinnati recently. Yeah. So I feel like Barty, I've mentioned, I feel like this is the year that she really gets that long run at the US Open to her name. She's proved all year that she is a deserved number 1. I remember some questions going into the year about her number 1 status, the fact that so many of those points were from 2019 under the protected kind of COVID ranking system. But she has really proved she is the world number 1 this year, and I've got her through to the semi-final of the US Open, much like yourself, meeting her in the semi-final. We had different quarterfinals here. You had Karolina Pliskova versus Petra Kvitova. Which one of those players makes it to the semi for you?
Yeah, I've gone for Pliskova to win that, even though she does trail the head-to-head 3-1. Those meetings, most of them came quite some time ago. And I just think Pliskova, clearly in the better form right now, has a lot more matches under her belt. I think for Kvitova to make it that far would be a positive run, given the injuries she's had of late and the lack of form. So I think Pliskova to carry on the great form we've seen from us, reaching the Wimbledon final and then final and semi-finals at the 2 WTA 1000 events heading in. I think Pliskova would win that all Czech battle.
Yeah, and I had Karolina Pliskova versus Maria Sakkari in my quarterfinal. but we've ended up with the same semi-final. I've got Pliskova to come through as well, and the reason is, I mean, looking at the head-to-head, it's a one-all head-to-head with both matches coming on clay, so that gave me nothing. So I've said this in the past on as Grand Slam predictions. I'm going to say it again. When in doubt, go with the seeds, and Pliskova is a much higher seed than Sakkari. She's also probably got more pedigree in slams than Sakkari as well. So that's why I've gone with Karolina Pliskova to come through and meet Ash Barty in that semi-final. So the other women's quarter-final, I'd say just take us through both of them here. So you've got Rybakina versus Osaka and Krejcikova versus Sabalenka. Who comes through those two matches to beat each other in the semi?
Yeah, firstly, I've got Osaka to beat Elena Rybakina. I think that could be an interesting match. She has beaten Rybakina before, I think in their only previous meeting. So, yeah, I think Naomi by that stage will have played away into the tournament as I'm expecting. Slightly disappointing results in the past two tournaments, but I think now that she's got those under her belt, I do expect we'll see her somewhere near her best here again at a tournament. She's had some fantastic success, obviously winning it twice. Great memories there. So I think, again, Rybakina has fallen to that quarterfinal stage in the previous two slams. I would maybe just see it happening again when she runs into a really top player, but it's not necessarily an easy one to call, but I'll just go with Osaka there. Then I've actually gone for Barbora Krejcikova to beat Arena Sabalenka in that final quarterfinal, which would maybe be a bit of an upset, but I just think maybe she could be on for another really deep run at a slam. Krejcikova, as we mentioned before, just the consistency we've seen from her for most of the year, but particularly even since winning the French Open title, she's backed up with really strong results. Has only really lost to very top players. I think a couple of those times being Ash Barty, but I do think she could stop Sabalenka. Yeah, again, a tough one to call. I think Sabalenka won their only previous meeting, but just maybe would Krejcikova with that slam under her belt, Sabalenka still chasing it, maybe would be a bit more pressure on her. So I'm going to go with Krejcikova.
Right, yeah. Well, we've got some variation here. After getting the first semi-final as Barty Pliskova, I've got Osaka versus Azarenka here. So firstly, looking at my quarterfinals, I had Naomi Osaka coming up against Elena Spitalina, and I just kind of think that one goes without saying that on just the last few years and on Osaka's pedigree in not only on hard courts but the US Open in particular, I'd just have to give that one to Naomi. And then for my other quarterfinal, I had the Belarusian battle between Victoria Azarenka versus Arena Sabalenka. And in the end, I've edged towards Victoria Azarenka. I think maybe for that extra bit of slam pedigree over Sabalenka. Like we say, Sabalenka's starting to prove herself at the slams more. She did it at Wimbledon. And I think a run to the quarterfinal, if she got it at the US Open, it'd be a strong way to follow that up. And I think she will be part of my thinking as a slam contender as we come into the next year. But for now, I'll just say Azarenka with that extra experience of the deeper stages of slams. I'll have her through to make the semi-final against Naomi Osaka. So for yourself, you've got Barty Pliskova and Osaka versus Krejcikova as your semi-finals. Who comes through those matches into the final?
Yeah, I've gone for Ash Barty to beat Karolina Pliskova, and will be a rematch of the Wimbledon final, which was a really good match. But Barty won in 3 sets, and it is a head-to-head. She's dominated. They've met a number of times. Pliskova has won 2, but I think Barty is on 6 wins there. So I mean, it is a pretty definitive advantage there over quite a long period of time, including 2 recent meetings this year, which she won. So I think just again, the form we've seen from her, how impressive she's been this year, just the extra variety in a game would maybe be a bit too much for Pliskova, but it could be another good battle. Both of those meetings this year were 3 setters, and Pliskova also in fantastic form. But I just I can't go against Barty there. Like you said, I think she really is due a really good result of this slam, which she hasn't yet had. And with the lead in run in Cincinnati where she didn't drop a set, I think she's going to come through the final here, and I'm going to go with her to meet Naomi Osaka. I would have Osaka just to end that run from Krejcikova, which I've picked. I think would be a really interesting match. I think Osaka won their previous meeting. Again, I think I've got the defending champion. I can see her getting through the final here again. Once she's found the form, played her way into the tournament, I think just at this stage of a slam, she would be too strong for Krejcikova, probably on this surface where at the big tournament she has been the dominant player at the slams. So I've gone for those two to meet in the final, as I believe also went for the Australian Open, which didn't turn out.
Yeah, and for myself, I've agreed with you. I've got Ash Barty versus Naomi Osaka as my final. Starting off with Ash Barty. I mean, like you say, it's a repeat of that Wimbledon battle against Karolina Pliskova. We've both got back down, and I feel like as good of a match as it was, I'd say that I'd probably back Barty to back that up with another win here at the US Open to make it to the final. Like I say, she's clearly establishing herself as the clear number one in women's tennis. I feel she's carrying a lot of confidence into the US Open. And I feel like at the biggest tournaments, at the slams, I think we can factor the Olympics out of the equation where she didn't maybe get the run she wanted. I feel like she really manages to put on her best tennis in these kind of tournaments. And then Naomi Osaka, once again, I said that I had my doubts about her looking at her section. I still have my doubts about her, but there's no denying that on her game she is the person pushing Barty the closest as the number one for in women's tennis. She's the number 3 seed, I believe, here at the US Open. But I do believe that if Barty's becoming a clear number one, Osaka is the one that's the clear number 2 at the moment, and it'd just be a great thing to see a final between Ash Barty and Naomi Osaka. Like I say, who I believe are the 2 best players in women's tennis right now. It'd be great to see a slam final between the 2 of them. So I hope it happens. So looking at that final, Ewan, who do you see winning it?
Yeah, I've gone for Ash Barty to win it. I think as I did at the Australian Open, which Osaka ultimately went on to win. But yeah, I would agree with you. These are the 2 best players in the world right now. And Osaka, as you mentioned earlier, I think it's definitely a number 1 player in waiting. She's definitely going to get there in her career, I think. And it's probably only 3rd seed and slightly lower ranked now, is because she hasn't played as many tournaments outside the slams and obviously missed Wimbledon. But I'm just going to go with Barty to win it. They've split the 4 meetings, I think 2-2, but the most recent of those came in 2019, so maybe not the most relevant of head-to-head stats. I just think that clearly shows that they're both great players, and there's not going to be much in this one. Like you, I think it would be a fantastic match, and it would probably be the best final potentially we could get. I just think Barty with the form throughout this year, pretty much winning Cincinnati coming in, the confidence she'll have taken from that, as well as winning the Wimbledon title. I just think she's got great momentum right now and is probably at the peak of her powers. Osaka is still somewhat coming back. I think to get through the final would obviously be an outstanding run, and she's never lost a Grand Slam final. I think maybe this would be the first time it happens.
Yeah, and I was fully coming into this about to say my piece on why I think Barty will win the US Open, but I think just to mix it up, just to throw in a bit of variation, I'll have Osaka winning that final, and there's a very good reason to have Naomi Osaka winning the US Open, and that's because she's done it twice before. She did it in 2018, she did it in 2020, so what's stopping her doing it in 2021? Yeah, she took a bit of time out. I don't think that's affected her too much. She's still... It wasn't a long time, really, to take out compared to the level of tennis she's produced, the amount of training she's done. It's not that momentum knocking, I don't believe. I believe she'll have still been training. So I don't think her level's any lower. Yeah, we haven't seen her win anything since her time out. We also haven't seen her take part in many tournaments since her time out. The Olympics performance may be a little bit underwhelming, but I think it's a minor blip. you can go out early at any tournament. Basically, it doesn't diminish you as a player. So yeah, Naomi Osaka, my US Open champion for 2021, and after the difficult year she's had, would be brilliant to see her answer the critics with another slam title to her name. But that's it. But that's predictions for both the men's and women's tournaments at the US Open. I think after all that talking, we've come away with both of us pretty much predicting the number one seed to come through and win both titles. Like I said, I switched up my pick at the last minute in the women's one, but yeah, we're both seeing Djokovic getting that calendar year slam, the number one seed. Who would have thought it? And we're both seeing Ash Barty and Naomi Osaka, the two best players in women's tennis at the moment, coming through to play a final. So really out there with us predictions this time. I don't know where we've come up with that at all, but thanks for listening. We hope it's a really enjoyable US Open. We hope for great tennis along the way, and we'll be back to review it in a couple of weeks.